time we have a class, always remind me to start recording so that we be on the same page. So on Windows, what are the windows that you need to have? The first one is the command section, which is down here. And this class, I'll be teaching you on how to write commands. So we will be writing our commands at the command window. You execute the command, you get results. Results will be presented at the center here. So just like the way in SPSS, a new interface will pop up. This time you're not expecting that, but rather things will be displayed at the center here. We need more windows. So if you go to the window tab, there's the variable window that we need to have. So once you click on the right side, you'll be able to see variables. So what does this mean? All the variables that we'll be working with, they will be displayed here. Just like the way we had variable view in SPSS, now this is our variable view. We need another window called review window. And review window, this is where I'll have now, just like having history. So every time you execute a command, they will be displayed here. And you'll see two colors. So one, if you see red in color, that's not a good thing for you because it means either you have syntax error or some few things which doesn't make sense to your system. So you'll get some sort of error and start getting comfortable with getting errors because that is how you will learn. Two, if you see on the review window that the code is black in color, then that's a good thing, which means whatever you are doing has been executed successfully. We need another window. Let me have property window. I also need, I think this is all. So review window, results window, command window, variable window. Property window is just providing more information again about the variables that we're working with. Okay. So let's dive into codes. And I'm using the same form. So I said, assuming you're doing a survey somewhere and you have some details that you need to key in into STATA, even though, again, you realize it's very rare for you to do data entry using STATA. So the first class that you're learning today is how do you handle data entry in STATA? And of course, in data entry, we said we will be working with both primary sources and secondary sources. What are primary sources? We said these are information that you want to extract directly from your respondent. So you have some sort of tool or a research instrument. A good example is what I'm presenting right now. And in this form, there are some sort of codes. So that means you can be able to identify the respondent with some codes. There's the age, there's language, there's some sort of marital status, all the way to some sort of medication. So let's see how do you go about this case so that if you are in this position and you have a form like this, how would you go about that? So the place to start is on command section. So we will be dealing with commands to key in this data. And the first command that I want us to learn is a command called input. So we'll be inputting some data into the software. What are the rules of handling commands? Commands are in lowercase. When you write input, input should be in lowercase. So what are you going to input? Have a space. The name of the variable is ID. So of course, ID is the name. I can have it in caps, not necessarily in lowercase. Apart from ID, I think I have age, language. But one thing you need to notice is, so let me get a variable called name. Which should be on the left. Anyway, I hope you're getting the point. Like I need to have a variable name so that I explain on ID, and I'll want to work with ID without the K. So let me explain about data types because that might make sense with what I'm doing. So we have data types which are in form of either numerics, strings, or complex. So when I say numeric, that means you're dealing with numbers. So the observation you're getting there in some sort of numbers. Two, when I say string, this means the data you're getting contain alphabets. But when now you have a combination of alphabets and numerics, then you have complex. So I don't want to dive in on how to handle a complex, because when I have K9 and K10, that is a complex. So how do you key in a complex? It's a bit complex. So let's not start with complex stuff. That's why I want to have ID with just the values 1, 2, 3 all the way down, because those are integers, numbers. So what does that mean? It's important because STATA treats everything as a number. And if you're dealing with something that is not a number, you'll have to tell the software that, hey, whatever I'm keying in is not a number. So I'm going to key in ID in my code. So I say input ID. And because ID now has integers, so I'm just good to go. But if I look at the next variable which I wanted to have, of course, the same case with age. So I'll just have space and then I say age. So both of those two variables contain numeric characters. But when I talk about name, you realize that name, I need name of this participant, and names are string characters. So of course we said commands should always be in lowercase, and I will write the str. It basically means the next variable is a string variable, and I want to limit it with 30 characters. So the same way in, what do you call it, in spaces, we had the option of width. Was it width or length? Something like that. Width, which normally restrict the number of characters in a response, but it's the same case. So we're just saying here, we're going to have a variable name, and these names of these individuals should not have a character more than 30. I'll have the variable name now, which is name. And after name of the participant, I'll have language. So of course, for language, I'm using 1 and 2. I'll be using 1 and 2, just like the way we coded gender. So for gender, we said let male be represented with the value of 1, let 2 be represented with the value of female for 2, and 1 for male. We're getting the drill. So the same case I'm going to use here, whereby I'll be assigning values of 1, 2, and 3 to mean French, German, and Spanish. So for language, I'll not introduce again str. So I'll just write the language. I'll have space. After language, I have marital status. So also note on how to create variable name. We said variable name should not have spaces. So of course, marital status will also assign those values of 1 to represent single, 2 to represent married, and so forth. But when I create the variable name, I will say marital underscore status. So the same case can happen also with education level. You cannot have spaces between or in variable names. So after marital status, I will have smoker and then medication. And if I execute that, you realize that on the variable section, now I have my variable. So that means I've managed to key in some details. On the review window, I'm not seeing anything in red. So that is good news to me, because my command has been successfully implemented. So the next thing that the software expects from you here is now the observation. Nothing else you can write here. So I'll go straight and say the first participant ID is, let's say, 11. Just have some 3 digits. The age, assuming is, so I'm not going to use the form. There's no point of necessarily following through this example, but at your own free time, I think you will be guided by these 10 respondents, so that you understand exactly what I'm doing. So for me right now, I'm just going to generate some fictitious data for the sake of the class. So I'll have ID as 11. Age, for instance, I assume is 19. Name, I can have the person as George. Marital status, I want, so for language, I'll have 1 for French. Marital status, 1 for single, 1 for smoker. In terms of number of medication, let me say 1, 2, means 12. I execute that. Now I have my first observation entered. I can do the second person, which is 22. In terms of age, let me have 20. Name, I can have Lucy. Language, I can have 2 for German, and then also 2 for, I think, married, and then 2 for non-smoker. In terms of number of men, I can have 116. So if I enter, so I hope you're getting the drill, but just to caution you, whatever you're seeing here or the interface you're seeing here is not how your data looks like. So there's a better presentation on how now all this thing that I'm doing is being stored. So let me just have a third person, and I'll have Hassan. So before Hassan, let's do age. Let's say it's 30. Hassan is, I think 3. I don't know, 3 was French or something, but we'll just confirm. By processor, we can say 1, means single. Smoker, we can have 2, non-smoker, and then maybe I have 1, 8. So I hope now we can see how to enter data, but let's learn 2 things. One, how do you add a new variable, and also how do you add a new case? Let's learn on how to add a new variable or learn how to add a new case. But before that, every time you are now done with doing data entry, assuming you are just coding some 10 variables and then you're done with it, so you've also entered those observation, all of them 10. So you want to tell the software that I'm no longer doing data entry, I want to do something else. So you need to write the second command, and that command is end. And like I said, command should be in lowercase. So if you write the end, it means now the software will know you are no longer doing data entry. So if you put in a command, it will know that now command is a command and not part of what you are keying in. I really hope this makes sense. So if I execute that command end, I'm not getting an error, but I'm not also getting some results. But nonetheless, that's a good thing because I'm not getting an error. That means I'm in communication with my software. So let's see if it will understand the third command. And the third command is I want to see what I've been doing. So I will use a command called browse. And if you browse, you'll see something more like an Excel spreadsheet. And now you can see how your data is organized. So we can tell the variable and also the observation. Let's close that window and let's learn how to add a new case. So assuming I add a fourth respondent, after assuming I have to, let me add someone here. Let me add Alicia as maybe one of the respondents. So I can have, now I don't have to go back and code because remember we use the command end, which denotes that we're no longer doing data entry. So the question is, how will you go back and tell the software, oh, I'm back to data entry? So you use a command called edit, which presents more or less the same interface as browse, but you can also tell from they're different from this icon here. So one of them is browse, the other one is edit. What's the difference? When you say browse, you just want to see the entry. When you say edit, you want to make changes in what you have entered. So this time I'm editing, so I will add the fourth person. I can say is 28. The name is Alicia. Okay. In terms of language, I can have 1, you can get 2, you can get 1, you can get 1, 1. So I think that's the all lessons of doing data entry. And like I said, not a good software for data entry. So there's a better place to write this stuff. So let's learn on how to generate a new variable. So assuming we were supposed to collect gender as one of the variables, but now we forgot to enter. So how do you go about that? So we will use a command called generate. But again, the beauty of STATA is you don't have to write the entire code. So you can just write the first few elements of that code. and the software will finish for you. So for generate, I don't have to write generate in full. For browse, you don't have to write browse in full. So even if you write BR, the software understand what I do. So I want to generate a variable called gender. So generate gender, and so since I don't have the gender observation of my respondent, so I don't want gender to have anything. So I'll say generate gender equals dot. That means there's no observation under the variable gender. If I execute that and BR to browse, you realize that now I can tell I have a new variable called gender and it doesn't have any observation. I will close that and go back and edit so that I can come now and tell that George is a male, so I'll have one there. Lucy, she's a female. Hassan, one. Alicia, one. Hope we're all good. So the next thing that I want us to do is to label the variables. So that means we want to say ID is someone's identity. Age means age in years. Name means maybe respondent's name. So we're just giving more information to somebody else. But before that, just note that as you are writing some stuff on the back end, you can see these are the codes that are happening on the front end. And most of the time when you're doing input, that means you're inputting on the front end, some stuff are happening at the back end. So there's a lot of back and forth on the interface. Now, what is the command to label? So if you want to label ID, you will use label define. Sorry, you'll just say label variable. And what variable are you labeling? So take your cursor to the variable name. There's an arrow you will see. Click on that so that you don't have to make mistake when you're writing the variable name. So I'll say I'm labeling ID to be identity number. And of course, you can see I'm introducing speech marks and there's space between ID and the speech mark. Actually, it doesn't matter whether you have space or not, I think, but you can tell me later. But just know that whatever text you want to be the label must be enclosed in double speech marks, not single speech marks. There's a difference. So if I execute that, you'll notice that now in the variable view section, I now have identity number. So we are doing that for all the variable. So for age, I'll just say label and pay attention to the spelling of label, and a label variable age introduce speech marks. So this time you can tell that you can see that I don't have space between age and speech marks. So let's see if the code will work. I want age to be respondent age in years. I'll close the speech mark, execute that. I have my results here. I hope you're getting the drill. So let me just do this for the last one and then we dive into something else. Label var, so I don't have to write variable. I think STATA encourages laziness, which is a good thing. So just say label variable, which variable? Name. What do I want for name? I want name to be respondent name. I think that's enough example to label a variable. Between now and tomorrow, you will go and label for language, marital status, all the way to gender. Let's learn on how to label the values. So if I browse, you can tell that for gender, I have 1 and 2, 1 and 2. That means if somebody doesn't have this form, they might not be able to really tell what this data is all about, which we say it's good. You can label those values. So what am I going to do? I want to tell the software that 1 and the gender is a male, 2 and the gender is a female. How do you do that? So we're going to use two commands back to back. And the command that we're going to use is label define and label value. So how do you do that? So we need to label variable gender, and I'll say label define. So I'm defining variable gender, and I say I want gender. Where you see 1, let it be male. So there's a space between the value and the character male. And then you say to female. If you execute that, now we need to use the second command, which I've said is label value. So I'll label value. Of course, I'll explain what I'm doing. Label value gender. Just twice. Then I go to explanation. Oh, okay. I think now I'm getting my first red in color. So you can see I need to go back and review. So why is the review important? So if I click back on that red color, the whole command will come down here. And now I know I don't need to have this backward slash on my code. I'll remove that. And if I execute, now I'm getting no error. And if I check my data, now I can tell that under gender, I have male and female. I think that is the goal. So I want you to go to, let's do for smoker before I take questions. So maybe for smoker, I want 1 to be a smoker, 2 to be a non-smoker. I'm going to use the same command back to back. And this time I'll be explaining what we are doing. So label define, you're just defining what variable to make changes. So I'm saying I'm defining a variable called smoker. Space, what do you want in smoker? So I want 1 to mean somebody who smokes, and 2, non-smoker. Remember the rule, you cannot create variable names with spaces. So non-smoker, I need to have an underscore. Execute that. I can now say label value. So after label define, label value basically means what should the software do with the variable name. So for variable name, which is gender, I'll just say let gender remain to be gender. Like no changes should happen to the variable name. So in this case, I think I'm using smoker. So I'll say label value smoker. Just twice, like where we have that variable name, let it remain like that. So if I execute that and I browse, I can also tell that I have the label for those variable. I wish to stop there, and I'll be continuing the class tomorrow from where I'm stopping right now. So if you have any question, this is the time. Otherwise, let's meet tomorrow.
Thank you, Rebecca. I hope that you'll send us the lesson being recorded, and we will practice if Allah wills. Thanks more for your time and your professional presentation.
Okay, thank you too for your time. And my name is George. So if you go to our YouTube channel, I think I'll be uploading the video there. So just review the video and also try to do it practical. I think that's the best way for you to learn.
So can the videos also be uploaded on our respective platforms and portals?
I think that's the goal. So the goal is for you guys to own these